Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Brian Tichy from Silverthorne, a little rock and roll band about to come out and attack. You're listening to Sonic Perspectives.
Hi everyone, and welcome to another interview for Sonic Perspectives. I am Rodrigo Altaf, and today we're going to catch up with Mr. Brian Tichy, who played for acts like Whitesnake, Billy Idol, Ozzy Osbourne, to name a few. Brian, it's great to talk to you today, man.
Hey, thanks for having me.
We're going to talk about a bunch of different subjects, but first and foremost, you have a new band called Silverthorne, right?
Yes.
Tell us all about it.
Well, we're a power trio because most trios in rock and roll want to be called power trios. So we are another power trio, and it's myself, Pete Shoulder on vocals and guitar, and Daniel Spree on bass. And we got the first single called Tear the Sky Wide Open came out last month, and I hope you all give it a listen and dig it. You can go check out the video on YouTube and all that. And we're just getting ready to go, man. We're excited, and we signed up with Golden Robot Records this year, and our EP will come out in a couple months, and the second single will be out in about a month or so, called Black River Rising, and we're editing the video now. So yeah, man, we're a little baby band getting started, but I can't wait to get out there and play and see if people react and dig it.
Very cool. And usually bands don't start doing interviews or promoting until they have a whole album or tour to promote. But you chose to start promoting it now with only one song released. You must have a lot of confidence in the material, right?
Well, we wouldn't be doing this and trying to go as far as we want with it if we didn't have any confidence. That would be a complete and utter waste of time.
Yeah.
But no, in this day and age, man, it's a whole different game than maybe how we grew up and how it was, the past decades. But now, there's so much social media involvement in how you can promote, and it's so different than having a band in a city, getting a following, a label signs you, puts money into it, takes most of it, but at least backs you and gets you on tour and gives you that shot. It's a different world now. So you can sort of come out with one song, and if it catches people and they're into it, and you have a fan made from one song, a lot of people are almost getting used to that in a certain way. People are just downloading one song from one band. I'm a fan of records. I'm a fan of LPs. And if I like something, I want to hear the rest of the meat and potatoes of what they created at that time. I'm sure we all have memories of the first time you heard one of your favorite bands on the radio, and we're like, who's that? What's that? You went out and got the record, and
Absolutely.
You were excited to hear not only one song, but 8, 9, 10, 11 songs of this band that just floored you on the radio. So, we're hoping we have the one song out, and if you dig it, okay, well, we're constantly promoting and moving forward, and we're not just going to sit there and say, here it is, here's a video, check it out, and leave it at that. You have to be smart with your social media and do what you can, and that's the kind of biz it is nowadays, man. It's not easy. It's an uphill battle, as I guess it always is, but it's just a different kind of uphill battle now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm curious, how did Pete and Daniel come to the fore and join this band? How did you get to know them?
Good question, and an interesting story. Daniel, bass player, came later. I've known Daniel for years. He's also out in LA, and we've recorded and jammed together here and there, and I always thought he was a great guy, great player, which he is. And when Pete and I had the songs together and had the whole concept ready to go, we contacted Daniel and just said, here's what we're doing. What do you think? And he was like, man, this stuff sounds great. I'm like, okay, it's in the beginning stages, so we're not going to be, doing much right now. This was actually in the spring, and I was already, committed to go to Japan this whole summer and play with the Japan's biggest rock band. So I was there for a bunch of months. So we got it together, and took some photos, made some videos, and did a little jamming, and it sounded killer. And so that's the story with Daniel. Pete and I came together in two separate ways, and the first way was back in 2011. I was on tour with Whitesnake, and Pete had a band called The Union, and they opened up our UK tour. And I didn't really meet the band. We didn't hang that much. You're on different schedules. Everybody's busy. But I remember walking into the arenas or whatever, and I'd hear them playing, and I'd hear the singer. I'm like, man, this guy's killer. Well, whoever he is, he's great. Kind of sounds like a Paul Rogers vibe. I mean, he just had this really nice, big voice. But, we met, but we didn't become fast friends or hang out, whatever. But that was back then. Fast forward a few years, and we re-enter each other's lives by a project we both got involved in, and it was a project that hasn't seen the light of day. But it was myself with the DeLeo brothers from Stone Temple Pilots. We had recorded some music together, separate from STP, in hopes of finding a singer. Those guys at that time didn't have a singer. Of course, they wanted that, but they also had other ideas and of stuff they wanted to pursue. We had music through a mutual person we all knew. Pete Shoulder was brought up, came in, we were blown away, and we ultimately recorded a record together. So this is a few years ago. And soon after, I think, maybe a year went by, or the majority of a year, the guys found a singer for STP, and he was the right fit, and they kind of had to make up their minds, because it's really hard to try to do two things at once like that. So that's a big undertaking. So being that STP is a huge band that I love, that I think we all love, with tons of great songs and a huge career, they opted to move forward with that. And we understood it's their life's work. It's their baby. You got to understand that. I mean, I wish I was in that position where I had this great successful band, since the 90s, and we actually had an opportunity to continue it because we found a guy that we're psyched about, that fit the mold and was there ready to go. So we, while we were bummed or whatever, we made lemonade with lemons, and I called Pete a little while later and said, hey, why don't you come back out? Because Pete lives in the UK. And I said, come back out. I have a studio. Let's, that he lived at when we made this record. He was here with me. I said, come back out. Let's write and record and see what happens. And he was up for it. So we did it. And it was pretty much that simple. But I don't think that would have happened if either of us sensed that we were sort of cut from the same cloth, similar backgrounds musically, in what we were into, what we grew up on, what excited us. And the more I got to know him when we were making that record, I was like, man, he's an awesome singer. Well, he's a great singer. He's also a great guitar player. He also writes great lyrics, great melodies. I mean, he's a really, he's a special guy. And so I thought, man, like people have said, man, if you want to start a band and get that happening, man, half the battle is finding that killer singer. You find the killer singer. Okay, now write some killer songs. But that's your big challenge right there off the bat. So we made up a bunch of songs, wrote and recorded them, and that was 2018. So the year went by. We were trying to get some interest, and had some management that we thought was a good choice, but ultimately it ended up falling short. And this year, through another mutual friend and connection, I hooked up with Golden Robot Records. The president, Mark, heard it, loved it, and said, let's do this. Let's get this going. So that was the beginning of the year, and we finished an EP, mixed, mastered, and did the videos and photos and got it all ready to go, so I could go away for the summer and come back and hit it hard. So that's the story.
Right, and I must say I love Beatz Voice. I'm assuming he wrote the bulk of the melodies on the EP, and his voice reminded me a little bit of Glenn Hughes a little bit, and kind of Paul Rogers, now that you mention it, at least in the mid-register a little bit, yeah?
Yeah, man, he's got it all. It's really impressive, because the really cool thing was when I first heard of him, when the guys sent me a recording of him just playing an acoustic and singing, it was just a little idea they were working on. He was just humming random lyrics, or just kind of mumbling syllables or whatever, but just singing over these chords. And he started out low, and I was like, man, this guy's got this low, deep sort of, like you said, Paul Rogers-y, Coverdale approach down in the lower. Then he went up high. Then I was like, oh my God, it's that rare thing that not many have, and we were all blown away by it. And he just proved over time, not only does he have those elements, but he goes in more of a folky, even a Jeff Buckley direction, which because he's just such a fan of that style of music as well. And it leaves us with such an open palette of styles we can take on with when writing songs and stuff. So man, yeah, he's but thanks for the compliment. I'm sure I'll be sure to tell him that.
Yeah, sure. And speaking of the single "Tear the Sky Wide Open," it has that classic hard rock kind of feel, but also a lot of other influences like 90s rock, like Queens of the Stone Age, Soundgarden, and now you mentioned Stone Temple Pilots a little bit. Is the rest of the material on the same vein, or do you take different tangents, different approaches?
I guess it all falls under the umbrella of, powerful guitar and, kick-ass vocals and raw organic production. We're big fans of the older huge bands in rock and roll, the biggest, and the recordings of those bands. And I love how those records were made and how honest they were and how real they were when you put on anything from Hendrix and Cream to the Stones and the Who and Zeppelin and Queen and old Van Halen. That's the band. Not to mention even more like studio sounding bands like a Fleetwood Mac or Eagles or Steely Dan. Every band had their own sound. And it was determined by the guys in the room that were playing the instruments. You captured the characters on the instruments and blended it, and there you go. Where today there's so much you can do in the studio with, I guess, what I call studio trickery, because while man, you can get a seriously powerful production, in a studio with a rock band, and there's a standard today which sounds a certain way. Yeah. And to my ears, it sounds a little samey at times. Like I want to hear Charlie Watts' snare on a Stone song. I want to hear Keith Moon with the Who. I want to hear Neil Peart with Rush and Alex Van Halen. And those are drummers, but I'm saying those sounds that, even though I'm a drummer and a musician, non-musicians do associate sounds with bands, and it gives it a character and a flavor that's unique to them. And I think that's special. And man, when you put time on an instrument for decades, or your life is spent, dedicated to playing an instrument and trying to be successful with it, it's great when that's, whether, man, come on, man, you put on AC/DC and you hear Angus hit one note and you're like, fucking Angus Young, man. You hear Eddie Van Halen, you know what I mean? You hear Absolutely. Brian May, that's it. And that's so in the recording process, that's what we go for. We just go for, man, what do we enjoy? What do we sound like when we play? And let's capture that. And the sound, so that's the sound throughout the all the recordings, but stylistically, yeah, it's like we love big riffs. We love big riffs. So there's definitely a variety. The one thing I know is we always. I like Zeppelin, like Van Halen, like there's so much has to do with groove. Like this song has to groove; it has to have a groove to it, and hopefully, if you're writing a guitar riff, it's a catchy one. And then, of course, yeah, you want to have cool lyrics and melodies, but really, we do fall under that, a more live sounding, aggressive rock band. And but man, it's not when you put on AC/DC, you want to hear AC/DC. You know what you're going to get, and you want that. And there's a formula there, which I don't want them to change. It's the best. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
But then you put on Queen, and Queen will give you a metal track into an epic, into a folk tune, into a funk number, into a into an R&B sounding, and I love a disco, and that's what you want from Queen, but it always sounds like Queen because the characters are recorded, I say characters meaning the image they create when they're on their instruments and stuff, it's just it's Queen, and that's the beauty of music, man. There's no rules. So right now our rules were there are no rules other than let's just make it sound like us, and we really enjoy like some of those bands you mentioned. mentioned, whether it's old, Band of Gypsies, Hendrix, or, Cream and Free and Sabbath and Zeppelin, all the way up to, Queens of Stone Age and Soundgarden. And yeah, man, we're fans of all that stuff because even into the 90s, man, there was so many great bands that really, you could call it grunge or, the whatever, the death of hair metal and all that kind of junk. Well, you call it what you want, but those bands sounded like themselves, and they were still going for real sounds in the studio. You still heard, whether it's the Soundgarden sound like Soundgarden, man. That's Matt Cameron on drums. That's Kim Thale playing guitar. Those are their tones, and so I love that stuff. And rather than kind of paint by numbers, like this is the correct heavy guitar sound for this era, and this is the correct studio drum sound for a metal sounding song in this day and age. I don't want that. I'd rather have, these are my drums in a big room, and we stuck some mics up, and I hopefully know how to tune them and hit them and record them, and we're going to capture that.
Yeah, and I had a question about that down the line, but you just touched on the subject I was going to address. You're such an organic player, man. How do you see the production these days, or post-production these days, with so much compression, pitch correcting, drums getting fixed to fit the grid? It's almost unnatural. You don't even need the studio for that. You can do it in your basement, right? How do you see the production these days? It's horrible, right?
Yeah, well, I probably wouldn't say horrible. I'd say the final version, the final song that they've done all that stuff to, when it's cranked on the radio, somebody who doesn't care about that stuff, somebody who just likes music for, a beat and a melody, and, if it's a good song, most people don't care about the snare drum sound. Most of them don't care, even though there's impact there. If band A comes on the radio and they have a similar production to band B, but band A's song is really good and band B's song is not so good, the average fan is just going to go, I like band A better. They're not super concerned, but it does sound powerful. I'll give anybody that. But man, then I go back to Pantera, and it's like, those were real sounds created by real musicians, and it's massive and punchy, and it almost sounds like, man, they had to probably really work on fixing a lot of stuff in the studio. No, they're great players that knew what they were doing, and they played tight, and they played with a huge groove, and they were smart people and great musicians. So I really don't, I'm not a fan of like the newer production, and especially those two things, especially you have a drum set in a room, and then after you get the sounds and mic it up and record it, you just go put a bunch of samples on it, you cut it and edit it and put it to the grid, and it becomes something that never really happened at all. It's like, it's you know what I mean? It did happen, but it didn't happen like that. And the same with singers. Like, it's I don't know, recently, somewhere this summer, I saw some old video of, it was Little Richard and Tom Jones, I think, just singing with Little Richard on a piano, blowing my mind, absolute madmen, just such badass singers. And I'm like, it was completely live on some TV show. And that was the standard, though. I mean, that was the standard. The Beatles singing, in harmony with no monitors, and Elvis, wherever he was just an amazing singer. James Brown, Aretha Franklin, Robert Plant. Oh my God, Freddie Mercury. These people, these madmen, these insanely talented musicians, got up night after night and threw down so hard and set a standard that, as a musician, I just look at that and go, I don't want to be anything less. I don't want to settle for something that's subpar to the shit that made me beyond inspired growing up and made me want to do what I do. So I appreciate newer bands that sound like themselves. And at the top of my head, I can think of, whether it's Black Keys or Rival Sons or the Audio Slave, or, you know what I mean? Right off the top of the Chili Peppers. Those are bands that sound like them. You cannot, that's not something you do in the studio. That's the guys on their instruments sound like badasses. And I have so much respect for that. And man, I go on forever about that. I want to put on Frampton Comes Alive and listen to that badass band and that badass sounding record, sound like it sounds because of what they created that night. I don't care if stuff was overdone and fixed in the studio here and there, as happens a lot with live records, which isn't the case with Aerosmith Live Bootleg, which I absolutely love, or whatever. But it happens. I'm just saying, it's real people playing their instruments, and I love that. I totally love it.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about your other endeavors. You just mentioned the tour in Japan. Tell us about that collaboration. The band is called Biz, right? Or BZ?
Biz. Yep.
Biz. I couldn't find much info about it, but tell us about that band.
Yeah, it's crazy. If you're outside of Japan and you're not Japanese, you probably won't know about them. But you go to Japan, and they're huge. They're like Kiss and Aerosmith together. They just did a 30th anniversary tour last year of stadiums in Japan. We're talking 60, 70,000 people a night that come to see Bees.
Jeez.
They've been around. It's the singer and guitar player's band. They started 31 years ago, and they've had many different backup formations of what they call, their support band. Over the past 20 years or so, since like 2000, I've recorded with them here and there. I do a guitar player solo record, or a couple songs on this record, half of this record. But I've always had a good relationship with them. And even back in the day, they did ask me to come do a tour. It was but it was 6 months, and I remember going, "Oh my, I've got stuff going on at home." That's a long time away. I had other stuff going on. But so many years later, they reach back and say, "Hey, we're thinking of changing some things up next year. What are you doing?" And I had a free schedule, and it just timing wise worked out. And it was nice to know that the offer came at a time where I could do it, and it was nice to know it was with people that I'm completely comfortable with. And I know when you go over to Japan, if you don't know much about Japan culturally and just how they are as people, it's a whole different thing. Everybody really cares about their job. And I don't care if they're washing a car, working at a 7-Eleven, or the manager of some huge corporation. They all take their jobs with complete seriousness and focus, and they're beyond respectful. So when they say something and there's a schedule, they stick to it. There's no messing around. So especially when you're playing with a band of that status, and they're going to be in arenas all summer, everything's dialed in. They have over 100 people working for them, and you come in and you're prepared, and everybody's respectful and nice. So it was a really nice experience. It was a joy to play with them. Musically, it's a different thing in Japan. It's mainly guitar-driven rock and roll, but it's Japanese lyrics, and there's definitely a Japanese tinge to some of the songwriting. But they also, being in Japan, people are more accepting of various styles happening in one band. So they might give you a song that has almost a Metallica riff, and then another one with a Whitesnake vibe, and then something else that sounds like Chic, and then a ballad that sounds like maybe from an 80s band. It's all accepted, because in Japan, they all that kind of music came from outside of Japan. So when it comes into Japan, it's accepted as rock and roll. You know what I mean?
Oh, okay.
And and it's cool, man. It was a long time there. I was there for 4 months, which to me before I did that, I was like, I might lose my mind in 2 months, because I've never been away from home that long with no break. But we kept busy, and we had a bunch of days off, and we had they took care of us with apartments in Tokyo. So whenever we'd have days off in between going from city to city or whatever, you'd always go back to your same place. So that gave you a home base where you could just kind of go into your own little world and get your stuff done. And I like being alone on my time off. I have a family at home and stuff going on outside of there's always other stuff going on, so you can focus on that and and enjoy those days off in your own place. So yeah, it was really cool, man. Japan is a great place there, and just people there are so cool. You can on a side note, just if you don't know anything about it, it's just cool, because I did look into it. It's like you can walk anywhere around in the country at any time of night and have no worries. Their crime rate is ridiculously low. There's barely any homeless people, and it just shows how much care they have for their country as a whole. So it just makes it just easy. The first time I went there in 1994, I was like, oh man, I'm like a stranger in a strange land kind of thing, and everybody's going to stare at me because I look different, but it's just not like that,
Yeah, I went to Japan in 2006, I believe, and definitely saw a lot of aspects that you mentioned. It's safety all around, and people are so respectful and so mindful of you. Even though you're an outsider, they don't treat you differently. Like they treat you with respect, right? So.
Yeah. That's how the whole thing went. So it just makes it cool, as long as you're doing your job. That's all you have to do. My job is to play drums in the rock band and show up on time, and that's it. Give them 100%.
Right. And you played with Whitesnake for a number of years, and you did only one studio album, Forevermore. Is that one of the collaborations you did that you wish would have lasted longer, or not really, or it lasted as much as it should have lasted?
Well, you never know when you go into a band, a well-established, huge rock band. You really don't know what's going to happen because it's not your decision. Sometimes, it's really it's up to the boss, which ultimately comes down to David Coverdale. When does he want to work? How much work does he want? What's his plan? And what's his pace? And I have complete respect as a Whitesnake fan growing up and buying Slide It In and being blown away by, Coverdale's vocals on Loving No Stranger and Slow and Easy. It's like that's it's, man, and back to Deep Purple. It's like I'm working for a legend. I have complete respect, and when I'm there, I give him 100%. And Dave is a great guy, man. He's an uplifting, a powerful person. He knows what he wants, and he does it, man, and he's happy when he does it. So I had a great time. I was glad to do it, and we did a record and a tour, and the next year was literally a year. The year was off, and I don't think the next tour was till halfway through the following year. And it simply came down to could I have stayed? Yeah. Would I have been cool with it? Yeah, of course. Is Whitesnake still out there kicking ass? Yes. Are my buddies in the band? Yeah. Did I have a good time? It's all yeses. But when you commit to something like that, you've got to commit 100%. For yourself and for the person that's hiring you, for the band, for all things considered, you got to give it 100%. That's your year. It's based around them and that schedule. And yeah, you're going to get paid and you're going to have a good time. But at that point, it just simply came down to me saying, if with me, it's I'm maybe not like all, I guess, other what you might call hired guns and stuff like that. Sometimes, and it's a smart thing. If you get a gig and it's solid and they work a lot, like some of the bands I've been in, and you can you stay in that band, you kick ass in that band. Well, a lot of people would say, stay in that, keep it going, man. This business is hard enough, which I totally agree with. There is the other side where sometimes when you close a door, you allow other doors to open. And for me, life is short, and I really want to challenge myself and see if and being with no guarantees, you have no idea what door may open or shut or what opportunity may come your way or nothing comes your way. And being a family man and having to take care of, my kids and, being an adult, not just some drummer in an apartment in Hollywood that, doesn't really have much outside of his basic little bills to take care of. There's a lot more going on in my life as, with most people, but I still have to bet on myself. I have to see and have a little bit of confidence that, if I really work hard and focus on what I want to see happen in my life, I can get there.
Right. Okay, going back to Silverthorne, how soon can we hear more songs, and when do you guys plan to have the live debut?
Yeah, we're the next single will be out next month. We'll start, at the end of the month putting out some video teasers for that. We're editing the video now. I can't wait for that. And then we're figuring out when the EP is going to come out, which soon after the second single. We're figuring that out now. And we're looking at some live stuff. It's like I said, it's all brand new. So we just got to get out. Being in LA, we can either come and do a couple gigs around here in Vegas, or go over to the UK and do the same thing. Look, which of course you want to spread the word. You got to get management, agents. You got to start plotting out your next year, and but really it all hinges on, do people like this band? Do people want to see us? So it's always hit or miss when you're starting out. I just think I think we have something really cool here. If we give it a chance, I think we're going to rise up and throw down and prove ourselves, and that's all we can work toward is getting those opportunities.
Right. Awesome, man. Thank you so much for your time, Brian, and I hope you hear more news about the band very soon.
Well, thanks, man. Thank you for your good questions.
Thank you so much. And for our listeners out there, I hope you enjoyed this interview with Brian Tichy. Please follow us on Twitter and Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're going to finish now with the first single of Silverthorne, the amazing Tear the Sky Wide Open. Take care and rock on.